This is called I Can't Breathe, the Retching of the Earth. We'll start with a little proverb. This is from the Swahili and Shona people. The axe forgets, the tree does not forget. And we begin by just wanting to think about nuclear explosions. Obviously not a particularly wonderful thing to think about, but it's something important. And when you think of nuclear explosions, what images come to mind for you? Well, there's something produced by an artist called Isao Hashimoto, a piece of work called 1945 to 1998. So as I say, that's a piece of work called 1945 to 1998 by Isao Hashimoto. And what's interesting about this piece, a record of all the nuclear explosions that take place between 1945 and 1998. It's placed in a particular way, kind of rhythmical beat of the month, the tick, tick, tick of time as it goes through. It's placed in such a way that it compresses that 50 years, and it begins to give us a different way of perceiving one of the things that we're doing as a society. It begins to give us a different way of seeing the scale of. And this is something that's, I think, very difficult for us to grasp sometimes, because we perceive events in front of us on a day-to-day basis, in the now, often with a very limited horizon, and we're not even sure when the horizon is changing. So although sometimes we might recognize that there's been a change, say between the 1970s and the 1980s, or between the 2000s and the 2020s, and we kind of know that there's been a change. It's difficult to see that change. Difficult to organise that change in such a way, intellectually and experientially, that we can encounter that change. And it's one of the interesting things about that piece of work is it's almost flat and neutral. It's clean kind of beat. Its use of certain colours, way of locating data on the planet. But obviously, what it kind of produces is not necessarily the encounter with the nuclear explosion. It doesn't produce a relationship to that, but hopefully what it does kind of produce is this encounter with the scale of this activity. And so when you think of nuclear explosions, what images come to mind for you? Have they changed? What images come to mind for you? Have they changed seeing something like that? What we think about is the Earth under attack. When we see the great mushroom clouds from the bombs, we have images of plastic bags covering the oceans, into the depths of the seas, the bellies of fish, into the mouths of birds, schizophrenic little girl without breath words, asthma and howl words, the insecticide suffocating plants, more and more concrete roads covering the breathing soil, Western architecture erasing ecological structures. What we think about is the Holocaust that we breathe in and out each day. We live in the time image, the last breaths of the earth. Primo Levi said, Auschwitz is outside of us, but it is all around us, in the air. Plague has died away, but the infection still lingers, and it would be foolish to deny it. By paying attention to and responding to the acceleration of moments of suffocation which parallel other moments, the moments of convergence and intersection that form new assemblages with unforeseen consequences, we can begin to perceive the chokehold on the earth as a breathing machine. Central to these moments we find the Black Lives Matter movement, Extinction Rebellion, Fees Must Fall, and other contemporary movements of resistance, response, reaction to the world around us. It is not any singular vignette that enables us to formulate the connection between these movements and other moments. Rather, these are brought together as symptoms, moments of suffocation, of constriction of the drive that is the breath. Eric Garner died on July the 14th, 2014, with the same words repeated 11 times. I cannot breathe, I cannot breathe, I cannot breathe. I cannot breathe, I cannot breathe, I cannot breathe. I cannot breathe, I cannot breathe, I cannot breathe, I cannot breathe, I cannot breathe. Please, please, I cannot breathe. George Floyd now, a repetition of this phrase. 6 months after Eric Garner's death, on the 15th of January 2015, scientists reported another kind of suffocation, the inability of oxygen to respond to carbon dioxide. and the convergence of other moments. Chemical bombs suffocating adults and children in Syria, people burned to death and suffocated by the smoke in Grenfell Tower, bodies washed onto European beaches and the suffocation of Vietnamese children in a lorry trying to get into the UK. An increase from 50 to 500 dead zones in the ocean, zones with zero oxygen, which means sea life dies. And is it not interesting that the most popular method of torture is waterboarding, which is putting somebody's head in water so they cannot breathe? Frantz Fanon was clear that if you want to understand colonization, you need to understand torture, the methodology of colonization, suffocation and the threat of suffocation, what we are here calling the chokehold. The chokehold forms an invisible iron collar fixed around our necks as much as it is around the earth, a collar that can be yanked at any moment by the capitalist war machine. We live in the time of the last breath. The chokehold is the last breath of the earth, and the human making it, not just a random event, but an impact event. Once upon a time, around 4,500 million years ago, the moon was part of the earth. But with an impact event of collision with a large planetary body, there was a tearing away of a hefty quantity of rock. The debris cooled, producing an assemblage that was becoming moon. Impact events are the metamorphosis of life on Earth, central moments in the structuring of new assemblages, often with unforeseen and unpredictable connections. Capital is the modern impact event, year zero of the faciality of capitalist imperialism, the white walls, the whitewashing, and black holes of consumer desire producing new species of life and strange hybrids. In 1974, US ecologist Garrett Hardin created the metaphor of lifeboat Earth. Future survival for him needed to be governed by the ethics of a lifeboat, in which there is no place for the wretched of the earth. This is the ethics of the camp, which is to speak of the Earth becoming a spaceship. It's only a matter of time before the air conditioning technology breaks, and then the wait begins the time-limited existence. This is to be trapped as a docile body within the intervals of the wait, and the melancholic and uncanny reminder of fresh air as the sign of their approaching death. Hardin's capitalist lifeboat spaceship of the future reforms the ship of modernity, but eternally repeats the colonization of the wretched of the earth and the wretched earth. How different this tale is to those indigenous people, for example the Khoi and San of South Africa, who adapted their needs to an environment, thereby maintaining ecological peace, as opposed to colonizing the environment to meet their needs in the name of a war on want. When it comes to animals, the earth, life, are we able to think ourselves into the being of the earth and the animal without a sense of possession and property? Can we become animal? Can we become earth? Hapo gay, hapo tama, hapo hazib dus tamas ke boy. A dream is not a dream until shared by the whole community. This is a Khoi proverb. Frantz Fanon said, when we revolt, it's not for a particular culture. We revolt simply because for many reasons we can no longer breathe. If there is to be any revolution that is to overthrow the chokehold of capital, it is the convergence of the struggle of the wretched of the earth and the wretched earth. Fanon, unlike Freud, does not overlook that drive does not start with the oral drive or the putting of the breast into the mouth, but with the breath. Freud's addiction to the eroticization of the breath shadows the development of psychoanalysis. Fanon focuses on the way colonialism, the white mask of capitalism, seeps into the pores of skin and earth, occupying the dreams of the colonized, the wretched. He wants us to dismantle the facialization of white colonial capitalism, the white cop inside our head. What Fanon makes vibrant is the colonization of the drives and the catastrophe that capitalism renders on the drives. The human has now marked the earth to such an extent that any sense of exterior nature is practically as well as intellectually incoherent. There is no human/nature or culture/nature divide, not because conceptually there is no real or useful distinction, although this is undoubtedly true, but rather because such a distinction is now pathologically delusional. To even think of the earth as distinct from the human is to act within a self-produced framework so self-destructive that it is akin to allowing a deliberate but disavowed Holocaust. With the convergence of racism and capitalism, we see the ongoing colonization of the planet and the entrenchment of the market system. More and more animals and people worldwide are living in grave living spaces. These inhospitable living spaces, such as the concentration camps that animals occupy, that we call factory farms, produce strange hybrids like swine and bird flu. If there is to be an encounter with the assemblage that constitutes the earth, then we can take as our starting point Fanon's final prayer, "O my body, make of me always a man who questions. O my body, make of me always a woman who questions." It is worth noting that this is the last line, the last move of Fanon's text, "The wretched of the earth." It is a cry, this make of me that Fanon produces. "O my body, make of me always a body that questions." In this cry, in this call to our body, we begin to take seriously the earth. What can be produced in the encounter between Deleuze, Guattari and Fanon is an uncanny assemblage composed of the wretched of the earth and the wretched earth of what some people call the Anthropocene. To encounter the assemblage that constitutes the earth, to overcome, inverted commas, the human perspective, or at least to have any hope of such an encounter, we must turn to our body and call on it to move, to act. To do this, to call on our body, it is necessary to bring together or make communicate those parts of the body of the earth that have been made wretched in a strategy we call retching. Retching is a mode of schizoanalytic practice that might be called Fanonian Schizoanalysis. Specifically, it is one that takes seriously the transversal of the coalition of capital, property rights, and drives. There is something enigmatic about the Fanon body and the Biko body, Steve Biko, in that it is not an atomized individuality, but one that bears witness and faces the ancestors and the earth. This collective struggle of the wretched earth and the wretched of the earth cannot be thought to be human, but rather operates within a continuum moving from the human yet to come to the earth yet to come. This struggle, neither human nor forgetful of the human, neither earth nor forgetful of the earth, this decentering from the human and recentering towards the earth, this constitutes what we call the strategy of retching. Fanonian schizoanalysis might be thought as a congress of concepts, one where Fanon's sociogeny can be put to work alongside Deleuze's difference and Guattari's asignification. Sociogeny, which Fanon places besides phylogeny and ontogeny in our understanding of the human, produces a rupture within our present knowledge system that offers, at the very least, a moment of critical reflection on the knowledge system that serves as the disciplinary structure of representation in the capitalist moment, the Western present of the Anthropocene. This Fanonian schizoanalysis puts into question our present culture's purely biological definition of what it is to be, therefore of what it is like to be human. It pushes us out of our present Western bioeconomic conception of being human, in which the self is built on the negation of an other life. Sociogeny, which Fanon places besides phylogeny and ontogeny, is important in that it kind of adds a key extra element to the way in which we perceive development, and in particular development not just of organisms, but of a whole assemblage of organisms, a whole assemblage. It isn't just physical and material, but is also intellectual and idealistic in some ways. Ontogeny is the growth, it's the size change, if you like, and the development, the structure change of an individual organism, the way in which we grow up. Phylogeny is the evolutionary history of a species, and with these two elements of ontogeny and phylogeny, biology gives us an account of different streams of development of the organism. It tells us that the organism not only exists as a specific individual that has a specific rate of growth in its ontogeny, but that the organism comes as part of an ongoing lineage, an ongoing line of evolutionary development. When Fanon introduces the concept of sociogeny or sociogenesis, he describes the development of a social phenomenon. A phenomenon is sociogenetic, and it indicates that it's socially produced as opposed to ontologically given, immutable or static. And it's this kind of dynamic that we need to begin to think with in order to think into the earth and with the earth and against the chokehold of capital. There are three overlapping circles in which the point of overlap can be seen as the Celtic sign of eternal life. The points of overlap with the minority elements form a swarm, three overlapping circles, sociogeny, phylogeny, ontogeny. The intersection is the body of the breathing earth. Or if you prefer, one-to-one relationships, group relationships, and community relationships. The intersection is the body. Or if you prefer, using the example of Guattari, psychoanalysis, Communist Party, and Greenpeace, what he calls the three ecologies of mind, society, and nature. Freud and Lacan speak of conflict between the law in the name of the father and desire of the mother, where the symptom is the complaint, and where repression, disavowal, foreclosure, the cure, transference, interpretation of the return of the repressed, and sublimation all take place. The product, Freud's common unhappiness, is bourgeois culture, or Lacan's synthome. With Fanonian Schizoanalysis, the conflict is between colonization and the subaltern. The effect is alienation, suffocation, exile, and asylum seeking. The cure, escape, comes through transversality, dream space, and revolution. The product, a body that moves, that questions, a new species.